Welcome to episode 5 of Woodworking for Beginners. Glad to see you still have an interest in woodworking. In this episode, we will be making a simple knick-knack shelf. We will be adding some angled cuts to this project, so I will show you how to quickly set up your square to make these cuts with a circular saw. Hopefully, you are getting to the point where you have some confidence when using your tools. Remember though, that they are still dangerous, so never take them for granted. For today's tool talk, let's talk about a jigsaw. Not all the cuts that you make will be a straight line. For example, what if you wanted to cut this or this? Well, you can rule out our circular saw and hand saw in this scenario. We would rely on a jigsaw. A jigsaw will allow you to cut curvy lines or non-linear shapes out of your wood due to its thin blade. The blades are measured in TPI or teeth per inch. A low TPI will cut through wood quickly, but tends to be a really rough cut. Using a smaller TPI blade will be a slower cut, but tends to be a lot smoother. One thing to note, the jigsaw cuts on the up motion of the blade. With that said, you will want the side of the project you want to display facing down. I have most of the items that you need to cut in the cut list in the description. You will notice in the cut list that one of the pieces I had you cut has no designation. This is not a mistake. You will be using that piece as a spacer for our project. I will show you how to set up the angled cuts on the supports, so we will be doing those together. There will be a couple pauses in this project. The first one will be while we are waiting for our glue to dry. The second one will be while we wait for our paint to dry. Of course, this video will not be in real time, so if you want to pause it during those breaks, feel free to do so. Let's get started making our shelf. Now we can go ahead and do our angle cut in our support. I'm going to assume that you already cut off the end grain of the wood like I discussed in episode 3. I've got the wood clamped at the back onto my table saw. So what I'm going to do is measure 1.5 inches and make a mark. Then I will line up the 45-degree angle and make a line exactly where I made that mark. Now, if you remember in episode 3, I had discussed on your circular saw that there is a notch on the shoe. That notch, again, is where the saw will make its cut. So with that said, we can use our combination square, butt our saw up against it, and just slide it until that notch is right in the middle of the line where we want to cut. Once we have that, it's simply a matter of clamping our combination square to our piece of wood. I'm going to throw on my hearing protection real quick. Now all we have to do is butt the saw against our combination square. You'll see our line is right in the middle of that notch. Make sure our blade is not touching the wood. Push the safety and pull the trigger and make our cut. And voila, we have a 45-degree angle cut. Again, if you want to freehand it and just try to use the notch to make the cut, that's fine. I like to use a guide. Next, it's just a matter of measuring 6 inches, setting up your guide, make the cut, and we have one of our supports ready. Do the exact same thing for the second support. Okay, so we have our pieces cut. We have our A, B, and we have 2 C pieces. We also have the piece that we cut that we're going to be using as the spacer. We're going to need our combination square, some 1 and 5/8 inch screws. I also have a tape measure, my pencil, and I have my 3 bits. I have my Countersink bit, I have my T25 bit, and I have my pilot hole. I'm going to set this up kind of a dry build, so to speak. Alright, so I took my 2 C pieces. I put my B piece here just to show me what the spacing is on my 2 C pieces. Now I'm going to take my combination square and I'm going to set it for 1 1/4 inch. The reason why is because the way I laid out these plans, 1 1/4 inch is my offset, and I am just double checking that to make sure my measurements were correct. In this case, they were. So now I can disassemble that because I know for a fact that this is exactly set to my offset. So with that said, I'm going to flip this over. Remember, don't flip it this way. Flip it that way. That way this piece is still on the back where we had originally put our 2 C pieces on the other side. So I'm going to take my combination square and I'm going to line it up so that I can make a mark at exactly where that piece is going to be, at least the edge of it. And then I will set that piece aside for now. Now we're going to require the assistance of our homemade clamps. We're going to take our C pieces, put them into the clamp with our B piece down like this. And this is just showing us how much space we're going to need. We put our spacer in, we butt our back end up against the project, and then we screw it down. Now we can remove the spacer. So now that we've got the clamp set up the way we want it, we are going to put a bead of glue on both ends. Doesn't have to be a lot, just a small bead is fine. Okay, so we have our bead of glue. We're going to put it back into the clamp and we're going to lock it down just a little bit. Now the reason why is because we want to adjust this back piece so it's perfectly flush with our supports. Then we'll lock it down a little more and check it again. That looks pretty good. Alright, so I put more tension on it. Now we should be flush against our spacer, and we should also be flush on the back. So once we have that and we've got it torqued down, now we need to drill our pilot holes. Now in order to drill the pilot holes, what we're going to need to do is basically take a measurement using our combination square, and we want to free up the ruler and push it down until we've got this measurement. This is the measurement from the base of the support to our cross member. So once we have that, we can make a line. And we should have the exact same, which we do, on the other side. So we'll do the exact same thing. We'll line it up, make a line. Now it's a matter of putting our pilot hole in. So in order to do that, we're going to have to put it in at 3/8 of an inch. Now 3/8 of an inch is exactly half of this 3/4 inch piece. So I'm going to set my combination square for 3/8 of an inch. Now remember when I told you that the ruler on your combination square is exactly 1 inch? I can use that. I'm going to make my mark towards the edge of the ruler at 3/8 of an inch. I can take my scribe, and we're going to go just a little bit lighter here because this project can move on the way we have it clamped. But we're going to get our starting point. We're going to hold the back, support this piece here, and we're going to drill. All right, so we've got our pilot hole. Now we want to countersink it. Again, you probably have to change bits if you only have one drill, but I have multiple drills, so I can just grab one. Now I'm going to use my T25. I'm going to screw that one in. I'm going to turn it around and do the exact same process. So I had it marked. Now I have my 3/8. So I just line up my 3/8, and I'm just making a small mark right towards the edge of my ruler. Grab my scribe, pilot hole, countersink, and put a 1 5/8 inch screw in there. So we have that one in. Now we can remove it from the clamp. Okay, so when we do this one here, we still have enough play to where if this isn't flush, we can still move it. So go ahead and make sure that this piece is perfectly flush. Let's reinsert it into our clamp, and we're going to buckle that down, but not quite as hard because we don't want to put a lot of pressure to snap this out. So if we tighten it too much, we could put too much pressure in this gap, causing this just to snap out. We're going to do the same thing. First, we're going to take our measurement. We're going to draw a line, double check. It's good. We're going to draw our line. We're going to use the same process where we use the, oops, forgot to set the 3/8. So we're going to set again, we're going to set 3/8 of an inch on our ruler. We're going to line it up, and we're going to make, again, a small mark right at the end of that ruler. Butt it up. We're going to make a small mark. We're going to grab our scribe. Let's go ahead and do both sides. I'm going to hold on to it, support the top. Now you may have seen me when I start my drill, I lift these fingers. The reason why is because if I'm going at an angle and the bit comes out the other side, that's right where my fingers are. So all I need to do is just support it. So I hold on, support the top. When I start drilling, I move my fingers. Going to countersink. And we're going to put 2 more screws in. And there we have it. There's the base. Let's go ahead and remove our wedge. Get this out of the way for now. And we have our base done. Yay for us. So remember when I made these marks here? I made them on the top. Now why did I make them on the top, you're asking? Well, let me show you why. When I do my pilot holes, I actually want to drill in this way, not this way. The reason why is because if any tear out occurs, it's going to occur on the bottom. I don't want it happening on the top. So what I can do from this point is I'm just going to use my ruler, and I'm going to make a mark at 3/4 of an inch from that mark. So I'm going to do the same on the opposite side, and I'm going to make a 3/4 of an inch mark just like that. So now I have my original mark from where my offset is on the bottom to where my wood is going to end at 3/4 of an inch. So now if I line them up, I should be pretty much on the gnat's butt, which I am, and you should be too. So now I want to put pilot holes into this piece of wood. But before I do that, I'm going to do one more quick measurement. I'm going to line this up on the back within the boundaries of those marks that I made on all the sides. So once I have it lined up on the back, I want to draw a line just showing me where it ends. So now basically I have the outer dimensions of my base drawn on the top of my shelf. So now what I can do to find the center is I can measure 3/8 of an inch from this mark right here and set my combination square. I'm going to make a mark on that one, and I'm going to come up here, line it up from where the end of the base is, and I'm going to make one down at the bottom just like that. I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to make a mark towards the end of my ruler there. I'm going to line up this line to the base, and I'm going to make a mark there. These are where I'm going to be putting the pilot holes. I'm going to need my sacrificial. I'm going to scribe and then pilot hole. Now you can feel when it goes through, stop. So now that we have our 4 pilot holes and our countersinks, we need to finish the assembly. So to do that, I'm going to loosen my ruler, line it up to the line I made earlier, and reset my ruler. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a small bead of glue. Now it's just a matter of realigning the top of my shelf to the base. So to do that, I'm going to use the combination square that we just set, and I'm going to push it until it's against the top and it's also against the base. So I should have something that looks just like that. Now I can hold it with my hands and finish the pilot hole. I'm going to set that screw just like so. Now it's going to be considerably easier to work with. So all these holes are already lined up, so it's just a matter of continuing your pilot hole. Okay, we're going to grab 3 screws. And set them. Alright, so there's the start of our shelf. The next thing we want to do is we're going to need somewhere to put screws into the wall to hold our shelf up. So we're going to do that by measuring out using our ruler. We're going to measure out 1.5 inches. And we're going to do that on both sides. Now we can use our combination square, and we're going to set our combination square to line up to this gap. So it should look just like that. We're going to line it up against the line we just made at 2.5 inches, and we're going to make a mark at 1 inch. We're going to do the same for the second side, and we're going to make a mark at 1 inch. Go ahead and scribe. Grab our piece of sacrificial. Well, the reason why I picked 1.5 inches is because I had to, and this, as a woodworker, you gotta kind of think of everything. So I did it because the size of this chuck. So if I would have put it, let's say I put the hole right here, well, I can't really get to it to drill the hole. So I had to compensate for the chuck, so I moved it out 1.5 inches so I could freely put my hole in there. All right, so now let's move this aside and we're gonna go old school here for a bit. What you're looking at here is just a handful of sawdust. What we're gonna do is we are going to make our own wood filler. So in order to do this, I have the sawdust here and I'm going to squeeze glue over the top of it. Now I'm going to take a putty knife and I'm going to work this glue and this sawdust together, making a mix. So our objective in making this mix is we want it to act like a clay, so to speak. So if I take some and I put it in my hand and I ball it up, does it stay in a ball? No, not really. It kind of crumbles. So with that said, I'm going to add some more glue to it. So I'm just going to put some more over the top. So I'm going to start working this together. If you don't have a putty knife, that's fine. Just go grab one of the good butter knives from your silverware drawer. I'm totally kidding. Don't do that. You can go ahead and use the 1 gallon paint stick that we got. All right, so let's check it again. I'm going to put it into a ball into my hand. Does it stay together? Yes. Little crumbly. I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit more glue to that. So it looks like I'm getting about a 50-50 ratio here. 50% glue to 50% sawdust. So I'm going to start working that together, and that is actually looking really good. And then let's check that. Ooh, yeah, that actually feels, so it should feel like a clay or a mud. I'm going to roll it into my hands. That actually stays together very well. I like that. Take a small ball and I'm going to put it onto my project. Now I'm going to take my putty knife and push it down and pull it off. So I'm pushing while I pull. And I'm going to do the same thing for this hole. Now you may see that I actually already have some on there. The reason why is because I've done this step before, but I didn't realize the battery on my camera was dead. So I have to do it again. So I just came down and dug these 4 out. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to put a glob on there and then I'm going to push down and pull off. Just like that. I'm pushing down while pulling it off. Just like that. Like I said, this is old school. This is before you could just run down to the store and grab yourself a can of wood putty. There are a lot of wood putties available now. This works just fine. So this, when it dries, is sandable and paintable. It will take a stain, so keep that in mind. So this works great in a pinch. If you are in the middle of a project and you do happen to run out of wood filler, go ahead and grab yourself a handful of sawdust and start mixing it with some wood glue. Mix it till you've got pretty much like a clay, really. And we're going to let that dry for 2 hours and then we're going to go ahead and sand it. So we're getting pretty close here and I will see you in 2 hours. How about a quick project we can do while we're waiting for that to dry? So what I've got here is I cut a 5-inch 1x4 and I cut a 5-inch 2x4. I put the marks on the 1x4. I set my combination square for 3/4. I did a 3/4 and 3/4 and I made 4 marks. I made 4 spots, 1 on each corner. Now I'll take my scribe and I'm going to go ahead and scribe those spots where they cross. Okay, once I've got them scribed, I'm going to grab a piece of sacrificial lumber, grab my pilot hole bit, and I'm going to drill each one. Now we have our pilot holes drilled. Let's go ahead and countersink them. So our next step is let's line this piece up with the 2x4. And we're going to just go ahead and finish one of the pilot holes. Let's put a screw in that one. Okay, so now that that screw's holding it, we'll go ahead and make any adjustments we need to, make sure everything's flush. And I'm going to go ahead and set this screw right here. Go ahead and finish the other two. All right, we have all of the pieces in. Now what we're going to do, let's back out all 4 screws. Once we have all 4 screws backed out, get yourself a piece of your 120 sandpaper and tear it in half lengthwise, so it should be 11 inches. All right, so I'm going to set my 2x4 on there, and I'm going to fold both of these pieces over, just like so. Now I'm going to put the top back on, line it up, and I'm going to put this screw in right here. So in essence, we just created a sanding block, which you're going to need when you're going to be sanding that glue once it dries. So the next thing I want you to do is take a piece of 120, and I want you to sand all of these sharp edges. And we're just going to smooth them out. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, once you've done that, take your 120, and we're just going to go over the top just in case we have any little burrs here that might poke into our hand. So go ahead and do that now. So there we go. We just made a sanding block that we're going to be using here in about 30 minutes. All right, so now our project is dry. Let's take this 120 and we're going to go ahead and sand it until it's nice and smooth like these. Run your fingers over it, and if you still feel a bump, then hit it just a little bit more. So let's go ahead and do that now. Now that we have our holes sanded down to where they're nice and smooth, let's take our 120 and we're going to hit all of these sharp edges. So we're just basically going to be smoothing all these out so they're not quite as sharp. So we smoothed all our edges out so they're not near as sharp. Now what we want to do is take some 150 grit and we're just going to go over the whole project just to smooth it all out. So grab your 150 and let's get that going. So when it comes to finishing your project, you want to start with the 120 sandpaper, which is a rough sandpaper, and hit your project, and then you want to go to a progressively higher grit sandpaper. So we went to a 150 and hit the whole project with the 150, and you can feel now how nice and smooth your project is. So we just take a rag to wipe off all the sawdust, and next we will take it outside and get it ready for painting. So when it comes to spray painting, there's a right way and a wrong way. So many times I see a person grab a can of spray paint, get it close to their project, hit the button, and just go to town. That is incorrect. So when you're spray painting, you want to treat it as if you were applying paint with a brush or a roller. So when we paint, we want about a 4 to 6 inch distance from our project. We want to move the can not with our wrists, but with our elbow, so we can maintain that distance. So, for example, we're spray painting and we move our wrist. Well, you can see when you move your wrist, you're losing that distance of that 4 to 6 inches. But when we move our elbow, we can maintain a nice 4 to 6 inch distance from our project. The other thing you need to know is that when you're spray painting, you want to push the button as you enter the project and let go of the button as you exit the project. So we'll spray, let go, spray, let go. Now the learning process in this is how much paint is this can delivering. That will tell you the speed at which you need to go. If it's delivering a lot of spray paint, you want to go kind of quick. But if it's delivering less, you can go a little bit slower as you go through your project. The objective is that we don't want to put a huge amount of paint on our project and then that paint starts running and you'll have a bunch of run lines in your project and it'll just look disgusting. So we're going to head outside and I'm going to show you the proper way to use this spray paint. Okay, so when I got this video inside, I realized when I was looking at it, it was really difficult to see me painting the white onto that piece of wood. So I'm going to repaint this, but I'm going to be using a teal because I really want you to see how this process works. All right, so remember, we're going to paint with our elbows, not our wrist. So we got to find that happy spot and we're just going to go back and forth. We push the trigger when we enter the project and we let go of the trigger when we exit the project. Now when you're doing the end grains, you will kind of notice that the end grains tend to soak up the paint, kind of like a sponge. So you may have to hit them a couple times, and that's fine. So remember, starting at the top, we're going to find that spot. So I'm about, I'd say about 6 inches away here. And again, I'm totally painting with only my elbows. I'm not doing a wrist motion. I pull the trigger when I enter the project and I let go of the trigger when I exit. So now I can just take a look at it and see, is there anywhere that I missed? Which is really good when you're using a darker color. So I'm just going to put another coat right on top of here. Okay, so now it's teal, and that's okay. It really doesn't matter for me. If you use the chalk, that is perfectly fine. I actually like the chalky feel when it's done. After your project dries, probably for, I would give it at least an hour in warm weather, go ahead and look it over. Look over all the spots and just make sure you don't have any exposed wood. Now you'll notice that when I was painting, I never stayed in one spot for very long at all. I was always moving. Again, it's just like using a paintbrush, just back and forth. I usually start at the top and work my way down. So let your project dry for about an hour. Take a look at it and just make sure you didn't miss anything. So while we're waiting for that to dry, let's grab a sacrificial piece of wood, grab a couple of the 2.5-inch screws, and we're just going to barely screw them into the wood just so they hold. We don't want to go all the way through. Let's grab our chalked paint, and what we're going to do is we are just going to spritz the top of these screws. Basically all we're doing is we're just making the heads of these screws the same color as our project, so when we screw it in, it's actually going to match our project and kind of hide the screws so they can't be seen. Ta-da! We made a shelf. If you notice that you're getting runs in the paint while you are painting it, just use a rag, wipe it off. Do it again. This is a learning process. If you feel like practicing more with the paint, go ahead and paint the back of it. You may want to throw on a pair of gloves while you are doing your painting. Just saying. Since the common stud distance in your wall is 16 inches, you will need some drywall anchors when attaching it to the wall. Take the ruler off of your combination square and use the level portion to level the shelf. This concludes episode 5 of the series. In episode 6, we will make one of the 2 items that all woodworkers must make to be classified as a woodworker. That's right, a birdhouse. We will need one 1x6x8 common board, and you will also need either a 1.5-inch spade bit or a 1.5-inch Forstner bit. I will link those items in the description, but if you want to buy them at the store, don't be afraid to ask if you need help. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments section and I will get to them as soon as I can. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new episodes as they become available. Gather the lumber, the bits, and let's have some fun while learning.